that I started just past summer 1991.
Let this not just drop off. So we're not quite standing still, but we still have a long way to go, Alex.
In fact, the experiences that I had growing up.
There is a renaissance going on, but we have to control it. And if we don't...
In Atlanta.
So right now it's a great...
Yeah, learn how to get better before you worry about getting over.
I think that the artist really has to be true to himself.
Welcome to A Dialogue with Black Filmmakers. And now, here's our host, Alex Haley.
He's perhaps best known for his breathtaking photographs of American life. Gordon Parks is a world-class photographer and much more. He composes classical music. He scores ballets. He is equally at home writing novels, screenplays, and poetry. When Parks turned his considerable talents to film in 1969, he became the first African-American to direct a film for a major Hollywood studio. Parks' ultimate cinematic achievement is The Learning Tree, a film that he not only wrote and directed, but also scored. Like The Learning Tree, Gordon Parks is an American classic. You know, Gordon Parks, when the expression living legend is used, I can't think of anybody whom I know that it more applies to than yourself. I find myself remembering how I first saw you. We didn't know each other then, when you were at the old Harlem YMCA. And I used to come there to share the breakfasts that were almost also legendary. And you had at that point just begun to be a national name for your work in Life magazine. And people kind of would say hey to you because you were so approachable. You know, you were everybody's friend. But you still had that aura about you, and people would kind of give you a little bit more room on the sidewalk. And it's lovely to, you know, see you in these years since, same as me. It's nice to see we survived, you know, and all that, so it's just great, brother. In your case, though at that time the focus on you was your photography, in interim years you have done so many things. You are a poet, you do screenplays, fiction and non-fiction, music, you're composing. And what was your inspiration for going in so many different specialty areas?
Well, I think mostly it was survival. I didn't finish high school, so I was a little frightened. I tried a lot of things just in case one thing failed me, that maybe the other thing would hold me up. Mm-hmm. So it boils down to survival. And as I discovered each thing, I worked very hard at it. Mm-hmm. I never approached it in a dilettantish way. Mm-hmm. If I was going to compose, I was going to compose for a while. If I was going to write, I was going to write. If I was going to make pictures, go after it, you know, but seriously.
Do you have of those, is there a favorite medium? Would it be photography? I guess I keep saying that because that's how I first knew you.
Well, Alex, I tell you, if I had my druthers and everything else was taken away and the providence was to say, well, you got two things, what do you want? I would take poetry first and music composition next. Right. The combination of the two.
Yeah, well, that's more.
They make less money, possibly, than the rest of them, but they're more self-satisfying.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. You know, talking about, I just remember, too, that great photographic essay you did for Life long time ago, where you managed to get in like a gang in Harlem. Got right in the heart of that gang and gave photographs of what they did, how they looked, how they acted. And I think it gave many, many people their first insight into what that really was like, you know, and somehow you had managed to talk your way into that group. I don't, God knows how. A key thing, obviously, though you love your poetry, I keep coming back to your camera. As briefly as you could, how did you first happen to get a camera in your hand?
Well, I was a waiter on a railway, and we used to lay over in Chicago on the way to Seattle. I used to visit the very famous museum there on Michigan Avenue, the Chicago Institute, and I'd go to a movie in the afternoon to entertain myself during the layover. And one day, I saw a newsreel of the bombing of the American gunship called the Panay by the Japanese. And I watched this gunship sink into the water and the steam and smoke rising. And right after that, the intercom boomed, "Here's Norman Alley, the man who shot this wonderful footage." I thought that was so dramatic. Norman, I had on a white suit, and he jumped out on the stage.
Oh.
I never forgot that. And when I got to Seattle, Washington, I had about $12.50, and I went right into a pawn shop and bought myself a camera. I didn't know how to load it. The man who sold it to me didn't know how to load it, but a man standing close by loaded it for it. It was 35 millimeter. And I bought some extra film, and that same afternoon fell into Puget Sound trying to shoot some seagulls. That's how it all started.
That's great. How did the learning tree begin? When did you decide to write that?
Well, that was because of Carl Maidans, who was a good writer at Life magazine and a very fine photographer. And we used to talk about my childhood in Kansas. And one day Carl said, "Why don't you write about it?" I said, "I can't write, Carl." He said, "Did you ever try?" I said, "No." And he said, "Why don't you try this weekend?" I said, "All right." I went home and I did, I think it was 7 triple-spaced pages, and brought it back to him. To make the story short, he took it and showed it to Evan Thomas, who was the vice president of Harper & Row at the time. And the first thing Evan Thomas said to me when I met him at lunch was, "We want your novel."
Dialogue with Black Filmmakers now continues.
When did you decide to turn your talents to motion pictures?
Well, after I wrote the novel, The Learning Tree, several people were after it for motion picture. John Cassavetes called me and said, "Gordon, I read The Learning Tree and I think you should direct the film of it." And I said, "Well, John, you know very well there aren't going to be any black directors in Hollywood." He said, "I know all that, but there's a guy out here that I think is just crazy enough to do it." And I said, "Who's that?" He says, Kenny Hyman, Warner Brothers, 7 Arts. He said, "Come on, can you come out in a couple of days?" I said, "Well, okay, I'll come out." And I went out there. Cassavetes and John weren't getting along too well, so Cassavetes introduced me to him very quickly and left. And Hyman turned to me and said, "Which film do you want to do first, The Learning Tree or Choice of Weapons," which was my second book. And I looked at him as if to say, "Look, white boy didn't come out here to play," you know what I mean? And I think he recognized that look. And he said, "No, I'm very serious. I think it should be made into a film. I read it and I love it." And I said, "Fine." He said, "Who would you like to write the screenplay?" I said, "I don't know anyone out here." He said, "Why don't you write a screenplay yourself?" I said, "I've never written a screenplay." He said, "Well, you never directed either." I said, "Well, that's true." I said, "Okay." I thought I'd go along with him. Then he said, "I hear you're a composer." I said, "Yes." "Why don't you do the music for the film?"
Jeez.
I said, "Why not?" You know, and then he said, "Now, since you're going to be the first black director in Hollywood, you're going to need a lot of clout, so I suggest that you also produce." So I figured he was trying to get rid of black directors forever, you know. By But Kenny Hyman stayed behind me, put up the money, and I went to Kansas with a big crew from Hollywood, and we made The Learning Tree.
You'll have so many people envious They could hardly be counted to have look like that. How many books have you written besides The Learning Tree?
13 altogether.
Oh, wow.
On my 13th book now.
You are now finishing the 13th?
Yes, finishing the 13th book. It's a novel,
Yeah.
18th century novel, based in England. Been working on it for about 7 years.
Tell me about it. I know how
Very
that is.
difficult, very toughest. I started to give it up 2 or 3 times, but hung in there.
Yeah. You know, I probably, as people sometimes ask, I think I probably decided to just drop roots totally, maybe about 6 different times.
Yes.
I was just sick of it.
I can understand
Yeah,
that.
you know. In the 70s, one of the films that launched a kind of what's called a black exploitation was Shaft. Do you feel that there's any similarity between the films of that period and the current films, you know, the black-oriented films?
No, I don't. They tried to mix Shaft up into that group, but Shaft was just a film about a very handsome black detective. This is who had been Cagney or Humphrey Bogart or anyone else, and it was, well, Vincent Canby called it just a great Saturday night movie. I didn't expect that it was going to be as successful as it was. I don't see that it has any connection with it. I think that the young black directors now are going in for, it's almost like a documentary of what they have experienced, what they've lived through, whereas Shaft was a tale, you know. I think these young men now are getting at the roots of their own existence, as I did more or less in the Learning Tree, although I came up in Kansas and Minnesota, which is far different from some of these young directors black directors who live in Harlem or the Bronx, something of that sort. They're telling their story too.
Yeah, that's right. Could you tell us about the ballet that you wrote and directed?
Well, the ballet, as you know, Alex, you're always looking for some way to keep yourself busy and to exploit as much of your talent as you possibly can. I always loved to hear Martin Luther King's voice. It thrilled me. And I always wanted very much to do something surrounding Martin. So I decided, well, why don't I write the libretto for a ballet, compose the music, and direct it.
We'll be right back after this.
Again, your versatility. What is your musical background? When you are saying you didn't finish high school, I didn't finish school either, so I feel very, you know, together with you there. And yet you do these things. How did you get that acquired?
Well, you know, I think I look back sometimes myself and I wonder about these things. I had no training in music whatsoever. I did have a good ear. I was born playing the piano, and I listened a lot to Shostakovich, Beethoven, Bach, all of great composers, and what they taught me sort of comes out in my own form. I think the only thing that really mystifies me about whatever I've done is the music. I think if you're behind the camera long enough, you're going to become a competent photographer. If you write long enough, you're going to be a good writer. But without having training and reaching up and grabbing a card and putting it down there, and then for 4 movements, you keep adding cards and themes until one day you see a 100-piece symphony sitting up there playing it. That is, to me, the mystery. And I don't think I'll ever know, really. It was just a gift that I had when I left my mother's womb.
Well, that's marvelous. It really, really is. Would you, I'm listening to how you respond to what you have, you know, to things I asked about how you did this or that. And I have the question now, do you feel, did you ever have to struggle your way or have things seem to just happen in sequence?
The greatest struggle when I was a child, when I was in Kansas and moved to Minnesota after my mother died at the age of 15, a tremendous struggle. 35 degrees below zero. My brother-in-law kicked me out of the house. Then I played piano in flop houses. I did whatever I could to exist. Eventually played professional basketball for about 3 years.
Did you really?
With the House of David. And it was all a struggle. But once it started happening, things...
Dialogue with Black Filmmakers now continues.
Oh, you wrote about me in there.
Yeah, I know it. Indeed I did. Was when you used to play in the flop houses, and you were saying how the pimps and the prostitutes were really saw you like a surrogate kid of theirs, and they wouldn't see you do anything that they didn't approve of. And that was so touching to me.
Well, you know, when I first went to Minnesota, I was a poor kid, ragged kid. Kids in Minnesota didn't understand my accent from Kansas. They didn't know what I was all about. They knew I was a good basketball player, and that was about it. So, you know, the sort of haughty-toity types didn't pay me much attention. When I played at these flop houses, and actually they were body houses, whorehouses, you know. The prostitutes and the pimps and the gamblers always, they liked me. If they saw me at a gambling table, they said, "You get away from that gambling table. No one will ever see you in there, boy, again," you know. They treated me like I was their little brother.
We'll be right back after this. With Black Filmmakers now continues.
What new projects, or say, you working on now?
Pardon?
What new projects?
Well, I'm just finishing a novel on J.M.W. Turner, the 19th century painter. I've been working on it for 7 years. I'm going to finish it this week. After 7 years, and I next want to go to England and do a film of it. It's going to cost about $30 million, I think, to do it, but I think that I'm going to get support to do it. But that's exactly what I want to do, and I've just finished a novella.
Will you do that with an American company?
I don't know yet. Possibly a combination of BBC and an American company. I don't know yet. I'm just so busy right now finishing the novel. I'll turn it over to my agent next week. Then, you know, agents, they're going to have their say.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, just in a sort of collective way, the things that you have talked about which reflect your versatility and your talents, I should think and hope would be certainly inspirational to, you know, younger people coming along who sometimes say, I can't, I don't think I can make it. But people like yourself refute that thought, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I've always admired your work.
Well, it's mutual, brother.
You've been an inspiration to me.
I wish we could
much
go
younger
back.
than I am.
No, not all that much. But
well, I think that anybody can do just about whatever they want to do if they try hard enough.
Well, that's true.
I really feel so. And I'm not going to allow anyone to put a limit on my aspirations and what I want to do.
You've done a pretty thorough job on carrying that out.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Gordon Parks' career has spanned many generations and 2 autobiographies. He has survived the 70s genre of black movies, and you cannot capture Gordon Parks in a single interview in a single day. There are too many talents. That's why he recently finished his 2nd autobiography. Parks' rich career has spanned decades and has been immune to Hollywood's transient interest in black cinema. This has been Dialogue with Black Filmmakers. I'm Alex Haley, and we thank you for joining us.
Baby.